Hello everybody. So my name is Paul and I'm from Total Ability, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the driving controls and obviously the modifications. That's my area, and I'm also a user of equipment. So things that I'm just going to cover: what's Total Ability, what we do, how we work with driving instructors, the physical and non-physical clientele that we work with, working with the NDIS, types of modifications for the driving instructors, and then obviously the next steps. So I had a bike accident just over 18 years ago, ending up in T4 paraplegia, and then went and resided back in Italy for a number of years, and it was over there that I was driving with more, at the time, far more modern equipment than was available in Australia. I returned back to live in Australia in 2011, and that's when I set up Total Ability. So we're a distributor for an Italian product by the name of Fardiel, or Fardiel Italiana. We're primary base is here in Sydney, in Artarmon, and from there we've obviously got a showroom, we do installations, we do demos, and that's where that's most of our Sydney operations are happening from. We've been working with driving OTs since our inception, and as Matt's obviously touched on, the OT is a cornerstone for this whole industry. And without them, obviously we can't really, we're at a bit of a loss, to be honest. So, and the other thing obviously is we work closely with the likes of yourself, driving instructors, for fitment and modifications, and obviously educating driving instructors to the types of equipment that's available. So the way we're working with driving instructors is obviously first off coming to presentations like this, where we provide some base education and understanding of the modifications and what sort of clientele that they're suitable for. We provide equipment to cover the various users' needs. So Peter's got some gear fitted, Michael's got some gear fitted, Matt Irvine, who's shot off. We work with Matt for a number of years with equipment mods. So we've got quite a few instructors fitted nationally. I think the number's up at around 80 now. So we sort of lead the way as far as supporting driving instructors nationally, and that rolls into obviously working with the driving instructors to collaborate and give them contact details for the OTs. So one of the biggest challenges as a driving instructor is jumping into this industry and doing this 2-day specialised driver course with the likes of Beth Cheel, which gives you that additional accreditation to become what we call specialised, and that means working with physical and non-physical disabilities. But that's really only the starting point. Until such time as you build those relationships with OTs, it's very difficult to get work. So one of my takeaways always is when a driving instructor comes to us to fit modifications, I always will say, all right, what network do you already have, and what network can we build for you to bring driving instructors so driving OTs can be working with you. And obviously Peter's a recent example of that, in that you guys know where Peter's based, up Forster Way, and it's obviously a little. At the time when we fitted his vehicle out, there was an OT practice that was working up there, and they were actually requesting a driving instructor have mods fitted, and obviously that was a good green light for us to obviously work with Peter and get his vehicle fitted. Since then, though, that practice has stopped operating up there. So it's made it somewhat difficult for Peter to generate that work. So now Peter's in a predicament where he's actually got to take time out of his day to try and generate a lot of his own leads, and it's not as fluid and the transition for Michael to go from a mainstream learner driving instructor to a disability driving instructor it's got its challenges. And obviously we want to make driving instructors fully aware of that when they start to come into this industry, and obviously look at means to make that transition as streamlined as possible. But to give you an idea, it's normally 12, 18 months for a driving instructor to start to build those relationships with the OTs. And I think we touched on, when I came in, obviously Matt, are you the only driving OT here? All right, so Matt will be all right if I say it. There's driving OTs that can be a little bit delicate, and so it's really critical to just nurture those relationships. Quite often driving OTs don't give you a second chance. So, and because that's where your referrals are coming from, and that's obviously where a lot of your work will start to, your leads will come from, it's really important to just nurture those relationships. Once a driving OT has trust in you, then all of a sudden it becomes a really collaborative relationship. I've seen driving instructors, just not, clash off the first assessment with a driving OT, and that's the end of the relationship. So one of the big takeaways from today is, if you do start to get into this sector, work and nurture those relationships with the OTs, give them time to get to know you, and then once you're at that phase, then there's the opportunity for you to teach them some of the more practical aspects of driver safety as well. So I'm a very big proponent of the driving instructor, because without them, the process of the driving OT is somewhat superfluous. You really struggle to work through the off-road and on-road assessment processes fluidly. Well, you can't unless you've got that driving instructor there, working with the client and working with the OT. So another aspect that we do is we provide ongoing training for the driving instructors. So, at the moment I endeavour to catch up with driving instructors every year or 2 years after installation, and provide them just updates on what, or refresher on equipment use, new equipment options becoming available, and it's also an opportunity just to do a bit of a brainstorm. So, for example, I caught up with Michael Michalek, I think, early this year. And there was a few techniques, something different that I was doing with a satellite that Michael maybe hadn't experienced or hadn't seen with clientele using the satellite. So it's always valuable, I feel, for those opportunities for us to catch up with those driving instructors on a annual or biannual approach. And the other thing as well is obviously giving the driving instructors those contacts for those OTs. So we've got a really good network or database of the driving OTs throughout Australia, and obviously for you guys here in New South Wales. And obviously we will give those details. One, we'll give those details to the driving OTs of the driving instructor, and vice versa, we'll give your details also to the driving OT. So I'm going to touch on the physical and non-physical. Obviously, I think Matt's probably touched on it already, but it does make a big difference, because if you're entering this industry and you're looking at modifications, one of the key aspects is start really with the non-physical, because the non-physical are quite often more challenging, and what you see is not what you get. Whereas when you're working with me, who is only requiring physical mods, what you see is what you get. All right, I don't have any cognitive issues. I don't have any acquired brain injury, so it's a lot less challenging, more straightforward, more seamless teaching me to drive, providing there's modifications in the vehicle. So I always say to the driving instructors, if you can teach someone with non-physical to drive, such as someone with autism or someone that's got anxiety or someone with a traumatic brain injury, that's not requiring any mods, because you can theoretically go out tomorrow and do that, because your vehicle is obviously suitable and accommodating for them because there's no mods. If you can master that, then the transition to modifications is normally quite straightforward because that's actually the easiest side of the industry on most occasions. So I do, we obviously differentiate the two, the physical and non-physical. Most of the driving instructors that we're working with who are doing the physical also are doing non-physical. There's few driving instructors in Australia who are doing purely just physical. So there's a couple, but they're few and far between. Most of specialised disability driving instructors are doing a mix of both. And that, with where we stand with NDIS these days, that's, on average a 60-40 split. So probably a 60 split on non-physical and a 40 split physical. Right? But of course, it's varying between the driving instructors. So NDIS has changed this landscape dramatically. It's obviously provided a lot more funding to the industry, but it's not been without its faults. So firstly, I just want to explain to you the three different types of funding available to an NDIS participant. So there's NDIS funded, there's third party or plan managed, and there's self-managed. So, and it's really important to understand the differences because that determines whether or not you need to be an NDIS registered provider in order to work with them and build them. So if the participant is NDIS managed, then you have to be NDIS registered. If the participant is plan managed, then you don't need to be NDIS registered. You can invoice the plan managers directly. Okay? And then if the participant, like myself, is self-managed, then you can invoice me directly and I pay your invoice. Okay? All three scenarios, you've still got to be very attentive. One, because you don't want to do any lessons until you see written approvals. It's not sufficient just to be told by client or even the plan manager that there's funding has been approved. You need to see something in writing because time and time again we've seen driving instructors out of pocket for doing lessons that haven't been approved. I would also advise you that if you're working with plan managers, just watch them on their payment term or watch them on not paying bills. In the early days of NDIS, we did see occasions where some of the plan managers just went bust. And I think we're beyond that now. But we have still seen times when some of these plan managers will hold off on payment. So something to monitor. Likewise, if the participant's self-managed, like myself, just make sure that, again, they're paying their invoices because there's no point in going back to NDIS and saying this participant or this client of mine isn't paying because NDIS will just turn around and say, not their problem. So I guess that touches on some of the issues surrounding funding approvals. I guess the other issue we've got as well is that NDIS, the overall scheme, doesn't really truly understand or hasn't taken into account the importance of driving assessments and driving lessons. So the driving OT assessments is fairly well covered, but there's a real lack of understanding within the NDIS of the need for a number of lessons and the importance of the driving instructor. So, and I won't go into too many details today, but for example, we used to have what was deemed to be the pricing model had what was deemed as a session rate, which was, the last check was $102.97. And it's deemed as a session. So it's not even deemed as an hour, it's deemed as a session. So, and when you're working with modifications, the $102, if you're deeming that as an hour, generally doesn't quite suffice for the service that you're providing. So we have a lot of issues around travel, we have issues around the hourly rate, we have issues around getting, when the OT submits the report and requests, because it's all by quote approval these days, so they might request, oh, Paul, we believe that you're going to need 10 hours lessons, which is sort of an indicative amount for someone like myself with mods, previous driving experience. Matt might get someone with autism and he thinks maybe they're going to need 30 or 40 hours as a starting point, as a baseline. Or we have someone doing high level in one of our vans and they maybe need 20 or 30 hours in order to drive with joystick steering, for example. What's been happening is the NDIS will just come back and say, oh, we've approved you 10 lessons. But it's like, well, no, the clinician, who is the driver-trained OT, has deemed that 30 or 40 lessons are necessary here. And someone at the NDS has just turned around and gone, oh, well, no, 10 lessons. Okay, so this is a big issue right now. The matter has been raised with OT Australia, and OT Australia have put in a submission with NDIS as far as areas that to be looked at. As yet, I don't know what's happening there, but unfortunately, everything within the NDIS is a slow-turning wheel, and it's extremely difficult to advocate. So, but it is, from my perspective, having worked with numerous driving instructors nationally, and the effort that they go to upskill, fit equipment, build those relationships with OTs. You know, there's still a lot of room for improvement. So, and it will be interesting to see the next 6 to 12 months whether or not NDIS comes out with any guidelines that provides a bit more clarity. So we're in a bit of a phase where things are not black and white. There's a lot of grey. So a lot of things need to be worked out there. So getting on to the modifications. So we've got spinner knobs, we've got keypad spinners, we've got left foot accelerators, we've got hand controls, which I'll show in the next few slides with some visuals. And we've also got, when we go beyond what's deemed reasonable to fit into a mainstream driving instructor vehicle, we've also got high level modifications that we put into our vans. So we've got 5 vans circulating Australia, and we've got one based here in Sydney most of the time. Matt's worked with that on a few occasions, and through Dean McMillan. And that's set up, all those vehicles are set up to drive from power wheelchair, and they've got all mainstream modifications plus the higher level mods such as manual steering and joystick steering. So, but that's obviously a big step up, and obviously that's not what I'm touching on today, but it's just handy to have in the back of your mind that there are mods out there available and accessible to clientele. So, as far as spinner knobs and keypad spinners, these are fairly straightforward mods. These would be the most common mods used in a driving instructor vehicle, and starting with the standard spinner, and we set that up with the unit that we provided the driving instructors is quickly removed. You know, if we want to change the positioning from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, it's quite easily movable around the wheel. There's no actual internal modifications in the vehicle, no electronics modified. However, that changes once we go to a keypad spinner, and there's a raft of different keypad spinners. Images there, and that second image are the Logisons. The third image there is a FARDL system. There's other systems out there available as well. There is a need, obviously, for electrical modifications to the vehicle to make those keypadded spinners work. Suitable clientele would be stroke patients or amputees. And quite often these modifications are sometimes incorporated with the left foot accelerators. And so if we've got, once again, amputee or a stroke patient, it just inverts the accelerator pedal across to the left side. So there's a few different systems there. That's a floor mount system from us, which is probably the most straightforward, but it's not suitable for all clientele because it does inhibit footwell space. So we've got other systems whereby you do a flip-up, flip-down system, or you do an electronic system that just mounts on the left side, and then the right side one unit is annulled. And it also means that a person could theoretically, if it's a top hinged accelerator pedal, they can put their foot underneath it. So the most of the driving instructor vehicles we just fit with that system. So we've got, I'll just go back. So if we're talking, we'd start with a standard spinner and a left foot accelerator, which we sort of classify as our first tier of modifications going to a driving instructor vehicle. And then the second tier would be standard spinner, left foot accelerator, and a keypad spinner. Okay. And then the third tier is obviously going to full hand controls. And obviously that's a type of modification necessary for someone like myself. So I'm paraplegic, no use of my arms, no use of my legs, just my arms. And two systems here are our trigger accelerator system, and that particular unit's got a keypad for indicators and lights. And then there's also a radial system. So you can do, yes? 5 minutes to go? Yep, okay. Yep. So we've got, the trigger system is what goes into most instructor vehicles, and on occasion we'll also put the radial system as well. So, so those systems there are a brake and accelerator system combined. All right. We then have got satellite accelerator and over-rings, and the satellite is a preferred option for someone like myself because it enables me to do two-handed driving. Okay. Another option is the over-ring, but the over-ring is quite challenging to drive with. But we've also got a few driving instructors in Australia that have got that option fitted. I think, Matt, you've had experiences with that. We don't generally go to an over-ring straight off the bat. All right. So if we're going to fit out a driving instructor vehicle like Peter Jude or Michael Mashalik or Matt's vehicle, we've got standard spinner, keypad spinner, left foot accelerator, trigger accelerator and brake lever, and a corded satellite accelerator. So that gives you a really good, encompasses a lot of users' requirements. I guess next steps, obviously before doing anything as far as modifications, always consult with the likes of ourselves. As I've already touched on in some discussions with Matt already, we don't want driving instructors just to jump out there and just get mods fitted. We want to look at doing a bit of due diligence with them, work collaboratively and ensure that there's going to be sufficient work. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to give you guys all a hard copy of this complete guide, which basically is what we give at Total Ability. We give to prospective clients who are going to looking at coming through the driving process. So it gives you very good insight of how someone like myself, if I was just going to go out and start on that driving journey and go through, get contact details for a driving OT, get contact details for a driving instructor, and the processes that must be followed, especially in consideration of NDIS funding. So it's quite an informative piece, so I'll give you all guys a copy of that today. Obviously, as I've already touched on, we can provide contact details for local driving OTs. So we also advise that, in Peter's case, obviously liaising with the local OTs in your area to validate that there's going to be a need. Okay. And likewise, we also encourage you to speak to other driving instructors who've got mods fitted and other driving instructors whereby you might be crossing over geographically. All right. So it's pointless for us to go and fit Matt Irvine's vehicle in Bathurst and then have another vehicle, down the road in Orange fitted, because in a place like that, there isn't enough work to have two driving instructors with all those modifications fitted. Yes, you could have two driving instructors, one with physical mods and no mods, working collaboratively, but both mods, it would create a challenge. So, any questions? Did I answer everything? Yeah. Yeah. So 80 driving instructor, currently on our database, I think just over 80 driving instructor vehicles. A lot of them based in capital cities, but we've also got, for example, I'll run off New South Wales. We've got Lord's Hospital, Dubbo. We did have Matt's vehicle covering Orange, but Matt since sold that vehicle. We've had Tamworth, we've got Newcastle, we've got Port Macquarie, we've got Tweed, we've got Wollongong, we've got Goulburn. So we've got reasonably good coverage, and so hence another reason, if it's something you're considering, let us know, because then we can also give you contact. If there is a contact of a driving instructor already playing in this area or working in this area, then we can provide you their contact details.